welcome back to Haa Maker Moments. So today we're going to learn how to make our very own oven baked clay. This is clay that you can bake in your oven at home, and it uses really simple ingredients, so I hope you guys will have fun making it. For some of our younger viewers, I'm thinking you guys could make some cool little animal shapes, so I'll show you how we do that. And then if you're not into making more sculptural pieces, you can also use this clay to make some jewelry. I don't know if you can see that, there's a little hole at the top, or even beads. You know, you could make a whole set of these and string them up for a cool necklace or anything that you would use bead for. So there are lots of cool things that you can use this project for, or use this clay to make. Let's get started. So the first thing you're gonna need to do is gather the materials that we'll need to make this project. We are gonna make an oven baked clay out of some really simple ingredients that hopefully all of you have in your homes. So the first thing to do is see if you've got some flour and some salt. The third ingredient that we're gonna use for this recipe is water. So the next tools that you're gonna need, or the other tools, are gonna be measuring cups. I've got a liquid measuring cup, some dry measuring cups as well, and then I've got a good old bucket and spoon to mix up my clay. So for this recipe, we are gonna need 1 cup of both flour and water, and then we're gonna need 1.5 cups of our salt. Let's go get measuring. Okay, so this recipe calls for 1 cup of cold water. So if you've never used a wet measuring cup before, one thing to keep in mind is what looks like it may be 1 cup when you're moving it around and holding it in your hand may not actually be the accurate measurement when you set it onto a table. So the first thing I want you guys to do is turn on your cold water faucet and let that run for a little bit just to make sure it's on the cold. And then I'm gonna very carefully fill this up, and I'm getting at eye level until I think it looks like it's at 1 cup. Now I'm just gonna show you here so that you can see, but I definitely want to set that down on a flat table, get down to eye level, and see if my water level is right at that 1 cup measurement. I can see I'm a little bit high. That looks great to me. Let's get some flour. To measure out your flour, you're gonna need a dry measuring cup. It looks something like this. And then something that has a straight edge. So you can use the back of a knife, you could use maybe the spoon that you're gonna use to mix later, anything that's gonna help scrape that top off so that we have exactly 1 cup. So I'm gonna dip this big old thing into our flour. And as you can see, I've got a bit of a mound on there. We don't want that. If you get into baking, all of a sudden that becomes that much more important. You want to have exact measurements. I don't think it'll make that much of a difference here for this recipe, but I've been wrong before. All right, so I'm trying not to make a huge mess. It's kind of the benefit of being at the AHA school. I can make all the messes I want right now. And I'm using the back of my paintbrush, scooping that flour until it's nice and flat. Then I'm gonna dunk it into my mixing bucket here. Now that was 1 cup of flour. Next, we're gonna do 1.5 cups of salt. So, got my measuring cup, 1 cup, and I'm gonna pour in my salt. Here, instead of scooping and having to scrape, I'm just trying to keep an eye on it, and I'm gonna stop pouring, and then I'm gonna give it a little tap on the table until it looks nice and flat. So that's 1 cup of the salt, and I know I need how many? Oh, right, 1.5 cups. So here's my little 1/2 cup measuring cup. To get the rest of the salt that we need for this project, I'm gonna use that. Oh wow, look at that. Looks like I had exactly enough salt for this project, that's great. All right, and I'm gonna pour that in. My next step is just to mix these two together. So I'm gonna use my spoon and try to mix just the flour and the salt together until it's nice and consistent. So I'm gonna work on this for a minute, and then I'll be back to add water. So I'm mixing my salt and flour mixture. until it is nice and even and it's got a good consistency. I don't have any big chunks of flour, big chunks of salt. It all looks about the same. And now I'm going to add my water 1/4 cup at a time. So I'm only gonna pour in just a bit to start. I'm gonna mix that up. And basically what I'm looking for is for this dough or this clay to start forming into a ball. Once I have all of this dough holding together and I see that it's starting to clump and form this big ball, I know that I've mixed it in enough. And I want to be careful here. I want to make sure I've got a good mixture before I add any more water. Kind of looks like cookie dough right now, although I have a feeling this would be a very gross dough to eat. All right, looks like I need a little bit more water. I'm down to 1/4 cup, so this is my 3rd add. Okay, and I want to keep you guys live and watching this so you can see. Oh. Teachers make mistakes too. Things happen. That's the best part about art. Just embrace it and move on. Go grab a new spoon. Ta-da! Okay, so I've been mixing this. I only added about 3/4 of a cup of cold water to my mixture. And I wanted to show you guys kind of how it's clumping together. And you can see it's starting to form more of a ball. So I'm not gonna add any more water to mine. You may need some depending on how much moisture is in the air where you live. But you're looking for something that can hold its shape once it's in that ball form. Okay, so our dough is starting to clump together. The next thing that we want to do is dump it out onto our table. So parents, if you have some parchment paper or maybe just a nice countertop surface that you don't mind wiping down later, again, this is just salt and flour, that would be a good place to do this. But now that it's coming together, we need to make sure that we knead it a little bit more so that it holds its shape and it's got a good consistency all the way through. So I'm gonna use the heels of my palms and I'm gonna push down at this clay or this dough, whatever you wanna call it. It could probably be called both. And I'm just pushing with both of my heels and pulling up that piece of dough. And the more I do this, the more together, the more held together this dough will be. All right. So that looks pretty good to me. It's all holding its shape. It's not crumbling apart and falling onto the table. That's the goal. We want a piece of dough or clay or oven baked clay. We want that piece to be held together in one ball. All right, I think it's time to start sculpting. One thing to keep in mind, I had to add a little bit more flour to mine in order to keep it as firm as I would like. So you may have to adjust that recipe a little bit. It all depends on where you live and again, how much moisture is in the atmosphere. If your piece is really, really droopy and it feels very sticky, add a little bit more flour. If it feels really crumbly and like it would be brittle and break apart in your hands, then add a little bit more water. Okay, so let's make some animals. I think we should start with something a little simple. And in honor of my friend Madigan and her incredible sculpture that she did in our Youth Art Awards this year, let's make a snake, okay? So if you take a little piece off of that big chunk, put it in your hands. I'll just do that with you guys. And you're just gonna push your hands back and forth or rub your hands back and forth to create a coil, okay? And there's no right or wrong shape. Maybe this snake just had a big lunch and it's got a lump in its belly. Okay, so I do want to just pay attention to the face. I think that's one fun thing about Madigan's sculptures. The snakes have the cutest little faces, which I never thought I would say that. Okay, so I've got my snake shape going here, and what I'm gonna do is just put this on a baking sheet and get it ready to go into the oven. You may notice that this is not as firm as normal clay, so doing complicated sculptures are gonna be a lot more difficult than focusing on simple shapes, things that can be supported on a flat surface. So I've got my snake, I'm gonna put that aside. I'm gonna show you guys one other shape, but you can get as creative as you'd like with this. Feel free to try to make some bigger pieces. You know, I love when people can prove me wrong when I set art rules. It's art, there are no rules. All right, I'm gonna make a little ladybug. So I just took a little chunk, rolled it back and forth in my hands to make a ball. And now I'm just gonna pinch it flat and create a little shape just for her head. And then later, after I bake these in the oven, I'll be able to paint them and give it those telltale ladybug spots. Maybe I'll even stick a couple little pieces of wire for the antenna here. Be cool. And after you have all of your creations set aside on a baking tray, you're gonna put this in the oven. So if your parents are there and can help you, or maybe you're very mature and know how to use the oven, good for you. You're gonna set the temperature at 250 degrees. And just to be clear, make sure your parents know that you're doing this. Set the oven to 250 degrees, and it depends on how thick your piece is for how long it takes, but I would say a piece that's about that thick, which is about the thickness of my thumb, would take about 15 to 20 minutes. So set your timer for, 10 minutes and keep an eye on it. This is a dough, so you just don't want to burn it. Once it's gotten the moisture fired out, it'll solidify that salt and flour mixture, and then we can paint them. All right, so I'm gonna leave you guys to it. 250 degrees in an oven for around 15 minutes. After you've done that, I'll see you back here to paint. All right, so I've gotten my creations out of the oven here, and I hope you guys had as much fun as I did making these. One little tip that I noticed as I was putting these through the oven and taking them out, if you have thicker pieces, or let's say you've got pieces with legs and it needs to stand up, give it a few hours to dry before putting it in the oven. I made a little mouse that was just a little bit thicker and had some feet, and he started to melt a little bit, but I think he's just turned into the cutest little mouse manatee. And isn't that just very typical? The thing that I wasn't planning on has turned out to be my favorite project. Love you. All right, so that tip, let them dry a little bit before putting them in the oven. Other than that, it worked great. I'm so psyched about this. I was kind of nervous about how it would go, but I'm really pleasantly surprised at the quality of it. And I did even include a little face. That's for you, Madigan. Before I start painting with these, I figured I would just show you guys some of the different projects that I came up with my batch of clay. And to paint them, I'm using Blick acrylic. It's just an acrylic paint. You could use watercolor. I even read you could put food coloring in the dough itself or in the clay itself to color things. You could use tempera, although it might flake off. If you've got any acrylic paint, that is how I would go, or that's how I would do it. So I have been just applying little layers of colors onto these guys as I go. There were enough pieces in my batch that I could just put a layer on, move on to the next piece, and by the time I got back to the beginning, it was ready for either another coat or a different color. So this little guy, I put a hole in the back. I don't know if you guys can see that there. These were, this one was inspired by J.C. DePriest's class, African Safari Animals. They did these really cool wall hanging pieces. So I made a giraffe inspired by her summer class. I don't really know what this guy is. He's just kind of weird and I like him. More animals. I did a turtle. I showed you guys our little snake. My mouse manatee, who I love so much. And then if you're not into making animals, I totally get that. I thought this was a really cool pendant. I liked how that came out. I'm not great at drawing feathers, and to be honest, I'm not really happy with how this came out, but how cool is it that I'm this much closer to being better at drawing feathers? I like this one more than the last one I did, so making progress. You can make the shape anything that you want. Just make sure to put a hole in the top there so you can string a piece of leather or a piece of cord through there. I also thought buttons could be cool. You know, if you've got a funky coat or hat that you want to add your own homemade button to, that worked out really nicely. Beads as well. I only made 2. Let's see if I can get a good shot of that so you guys can see that there is a hole all the way through these. So if you liked doing this project and you really want to get into making beads, you can make a whole bunch of them and start making necklaces, bracelets, all kinds of good stuff. And then the last little piece here is just a pinch pot. So I told you guys these are great for trinket dishes. I like having them around the house just to catch odds and ends. All right, so before I hop off, I'm gonna finish putting the little spots on my ladybug. So you guys saw me make this earlier, and I did already put a couple coats of color. Oh, let's hope I don't get paint on my fingers onto my piece. And I'm just going to paint a line straight-ish down. And then I'm gonna put my ladybug spots on there. So much fun. The cool thing about this project is it kind of took me all day. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking for things that can occupy my time right about now. It's great because you get that experience of making the medium itself, this clay. And then after you've made all of your creatures, which takes some time, now I just spent the last hour or two painting all of them. So really fun project. I hope you guys enjoy it. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And I hope to get more of these videos out to you guys soon. I know so many of our awesome community members are working on some. So in the meantime, stay safe and stay creative. See you next time.